Hi. It's been a while since I did the last update on my little ambient palette case here. A lot has happened to it, and I'm going to walk through that today. But I've also added Monome Grid, which is really exciting. It lets me do some really interesting things where I get to control this in a much more hands-on way than I did before. But before it was purely generative. Now it's kind of generative, but with me providing little hints through the controller here. So let me walk you through it. Alright, this is my new ambient palette case. I guess I just said that. The configuration I have right now is I have the Monome Teletype, which I'm not using for driving melody anymore. Instead, I'm using it to drive structured control changes to change what the Morphagene does. And the Morphagene, is my new sound source. If you're not familiar with the Morphagene, let me give you like a very quick overview. It has a little SD card where I can store samples taken from my piano playing or from my regular modular synth. That's what we're listening to right now. It's just a simple little set of tones from my regular modular synth. And then what Morphagene will do is, in the samples you have little cue markers, and each of those turn into a slice here. So I can switch from the current slice to another one. And it only does that when it's done playing one. So listen here. We switch to the next one. Turn it again. And we get the next one. So this lets me bring in a lot of different sounds to work with in this. And it might seem pretty simple that all I can do is really play back that, but it actually gets a lot more complicated than that. So right now I have the size of it, each slice is playing, set to the full slice. So in this case, every slice holds a simple note being played. But what happens if I make it smaller? Now you can hear it's a much smaller part of that same tone. We go even smaller. In fact, we can go all the way up to like audio rate. At this point, we're taking like tiny little slivers out of it. And then slide lets me choose where I'm taking that slice from. And I can do some neat tricks with Morph here that lets individual pieces overlap each other. Let's try that. See how it kind of like softens it out and blends it. So now we have something that's way more textural. Let me go back to the full size here. Now we're back. And then I'm just going to show you one more feature, but I recommend if you're not familiar with Morphagene, go watch some full videos on it. It is phenomenal. So the last one is this one here, which controls the speed. So we can go up. It controls pitch as well, because at higher speeds the same sample plays at a higher pitch. And so this is exactly an octave below. What we're hearing right now in the background is the Mimeophone doing a delay from way in the past. I can remove that for a second, but it does make it a lot more lush and interesting. We can go even slower. Let's see. There we go. 2 octaves below, and suddenly what was this vibrant mid-frequency modular synth sound is like a deep rumbling textural thing. Switch to another one, yeah. So that's the intent. Use that as a sound source. lets me really explore almost like a remix of my other sounds. Right now I have this plugged straight into the Mimeophone. I think I went through that in my last ambient case walkthrough too. This is not really anything new. If you don't know it so far, it's a delay and reverb unit, but it does a lot of very weird, very special things. One of the things I really like it for here is it has this zone control. And basically, instead of repeating what you're just playing now, you can repeat things that were way in the past. And this lets you really create some awesome things where if I'm switching between tones here, suddenly they're layering on top of each other, and it creates this a way for me to create harmonies, even though I'm really only working in a monophonic way here. It has some nice other things too. You can have an insane amount of repeats all the way up to infinite, at which point the unit really turns into more of like a somewhere in between a chorus and a flanger, which is really interesting. You can actually lock the current buffers in, and then you can control them 1 volt per octave, so you can actually play the buffers that are in there as another oscillator. Everything has nice CV control of it, so you can really modulate it. It has this little interesting skew button. When I press this, the two left and right shift just ever so slightly, and it creates like a really nice wide stereo field. So that's in essence those two. In the middle of them, I have a little module here labeled uBurst. I believe this one is from After Later Audio. It is essentially a clone of Mutable Instruments Clouds. The interesting part here is that Clouds actually does some of the same as the MorpheGene. It takes incoming sound, splits it up into tiny little granular pieces, and plays those out. What I like, and the reason I have it in here, is that I can use this to create a larger soft texture, or I can use it to play full pieces of sound or rhythm, pull it into here, rip it apart into tiny little pieces, and then throw it into the Mimeophone to mash it together, add reverb, add delay, and kind of like make the whole thing gel. That's the essence of it. I have two other little things up here. One is the nonlinear circuit Sloth, which is actually really interesting together with MorpheGene. I'll show you that in a second. And then it's this little thing from Intellijel that allows me to both get pressure out of CV, but also generate gate every time I tap this little sensor. So it's just a fun little way to make the whole thing more interactive and playable. Let me show you first. Let me show you the Sloth thing, and then after that, I'll show you what I'm doing with the grid controller. So, Sloth is essentially two outputs. It's you can think of it as just a really slow-moving LFO. You can see by the little light here the value of it. The two values, essentially, if you imagine that it's moving in a big circle, there would be an opposite end, so you get two different variables out at the same time. However, there's also an input. And the minute you add something to the input and start modulating this, instead of being a very smooth, slow-moving thing, it starts becoming jittery and a lot more chaotic. So what do we use as input source for that? Well, I have two things here that I think are really interesting to use. One is, of course, the gate here. So we could do something fun now. Let's take one of the outputs here, and let's use this to select the slice in MorpheGene. So now this LFO is slowly going to cycle through them, and you can kind of see by the color here what slice it's selected. Maybe if I switch the gene size again, so it'll be a little more frequent that it changes. Let's see what we got here. All right, so now we can hear it's cycling through them. Let's now add the CV out from from this little touch point to the Sloth in. And so we can hear it's like slowly moving through them. I don't know if you can see the little light there, but that shows the value as well. Now if I start massaging this, I'm essentially adding chaos, which changes the frequency there. So that's one nice way to interact with it. The other way, which is even more chaotic, is a nice side effect of the Morphagene, and something that I didn't even know about when I bought it is it has a little CV out here from this little light, and you kind of see as the sound volume gets higher through some of these, the light turns on, and what essentially this is an envelope follower, which means the higher the volume of the sound is generating, the higher that value is. Well, if we connect that to the input of the Sloth, we suddenly get something where the higher the volume of what comes out of the Morphagene, the more crazy the outputs. See, it's lighting up there from the Sloth gets, and the more irregular they get. So let's try to use that and do something fun. Connect this one up here. This is just a little multiple buff, so it just allows me to take one signal and spread it out to a lot of others. In this case, let's have this control both the reverb and the darkness. So now we have this thing that's cycling and affecting the output sound from here. At the same time, the louder the output sound becomes, the more chaotic this thing gets, and the more chaotic the changing reverb and color this over here gets. Let's maybe bring this thing into action. So this little thing over here, the program I have running on it right now is a sequencer. I'm gonna do a separate video on. I call it the Rule 30 sequencer. Essentially, it implements a little cellular automata called Rule 30, discovered by Stephen Wolfram, and it was a name he gave it. If I press a button up here, I can press any of these, then it generates a pattern based on the rules of the Rule 30 automata. I can add more of them. And so what you can see here is that it creates like a very chaotic, unpredictable pattern down here. So that to me is like the perfect kind of pattern to base some of this generative ambient music on. And the way I've set this up is I have 4 tracks down here. It's slowly cycling through these values here, and every time one of these tracks hits a lit up value, it creates a pulse and it creates a CV voltage based on some values I've already set in the tracker here. Let's try to use this for something. So let's maybe set the gene size with one of these, and maybe set the morph value with another, and now things are getting a little crazy, huh? And then let's set the slide over here. Okay. So So now we have this slow moving thing that is generating sounds from the Morphagene by ripping apart these samples and repeating them in tiny slices and feeding that into the Mimeophone, where we're adding echo and reverb to create like a full ambient, maybe texture more than melody. Another little feature I added down here is right now the values are switching between high and low. If I click these little buttons now, these two tracks are going to slowly move between them. There's a slew function in the teletype that I'm using for that. Let's see, what else might we want to do here? So we can find another long cable here. Let's do something really crazy. And let's change the number of repeats based on this. And then let's turn the ratio up a little bit to more sound from the Mimeophone. This works as like a wet-dry balance. Yeah, to me this is pretty good. I like this a lot. And yeah, I don't know if there's a lot more to introduce you to here. As you can hear, this is kind of a completely different little ambient machine than the last configuration I had. I'm super excited to explore this and see where it goes. I put up one little video earlier today, and I hope to make a lot of little jams with this that I'll be posting online. The other thing I got for this little ambient box is I bought a battery pack that I can drive the whole thing from, which means I can bring it with me and take it out into nature or to a friend's house, well, maybe not during COVID, but a different time, to a friend's house, and essentially sit down and do a little jam with it wherever I might be. I hope this was fun. I hope this was inspirational. Maybe gave you some ideas for some modules that you could incorporate in your own music. Some different ways in which you could modulate some of your own music. Again, I will do a deep dive on this Rule 30 sequencer at a different time. I'll walk through the actual code and I'll provide it as an open source piece of code online in case you have a teletype and you want to play around with it. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope this was useful in some way. I hope it gave you some inspiration for things you might want to go try out or modules you might want to look at. If there's anything else you want to see, give me a comment and let me know what was interesting or what else you would like me to cover, and I'm happy to do another video on it. Thanks for watching.